Good evening. I don't know what happened. The the little thing didn't start. Okay, sorry about that. Good afternoon, guys. My name is Carmen, and I am your host tonight. And tonight we have one of our favorites here, Pastor Olin Giles. He is a full-time missionary, ordained minister, speaker, and trainer at radicaltruth.net. He has served as a youth pastor, senior pastor, associational youth director, and Radio Christi director at Appalachian State University, engaging unbelievers with the gospel and equipping the church with to defend the historical Christian faith. His passion and purpose in life. His desire is to see every Christian equipped and ready to engage in the battle of ideas is at the heart of his ministry and calling. Olin's personal YouTube channel is called Why Christianity. Please welcome Olin. I love your Why Christianity name. I love that. It's such a good name.
I I looked at why Islam for a number of years, and I thought, well, somebody needs to do why Christianity.
Yeah.
And Jay Smith encouraged me to do that, and I did. So
Yeah, it's great. Okay, so you have your PowerPoint there, and
all right,
then I'll be in backstage. So if you need me, I'll be around.
sounds great. Thank you so much, Carm.
You're welcome.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining with us tonight. I want to talk to you about the historical credibility of the Bible and the Quran. Both books make historical claims. The disciples of Jesus claim to be eyewitnesses. I think of 1 John 1:3 says that we proclaim to you what we have seen and heard so that you may have fellowship with us. And this fellowship of ours is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. I also think of Acts 17:30 and 31. Love this passage. Here we're told that in the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed, and he has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. And then, of course, there is the classic 1 Corinthians 15:14 that basically says, Paul says here, if the resurrection of Jesus was not a real historical event, then our preaching is vain. Your faith also is vain. In other words, it's all worthless. So it all hangs by this historical thread. And of course, the Quran makes an entirely different set of historical claims. Muslims claim to be the true Abrahamic religion, Surah 367. The Quran says that Jesus was no more than a prophet, so stop saying 171. And then, Muslims today also make the historical claim that our Bibles have suffered wholesale corruption. And they make this claim despite what the Quran says. But the question that I want to try to answer tonight is, what does the historical evidence tell us? Whether Christian or Muslim, we should follow the evidence wherever it leads. And I'm going to go to Dr. Bart Ehrman. I'm sure everyone's familiar with him. He's an atheist New Testament scholar, and a lot of Muslims and skeptics in general look to his work. They love to use his words to attack the Bible. Meanwhile, they practically ignore the majority of what he says just because it doesn't fit their agenda. And here I have a quote for you where Ehrman is talking about the Gospels, and he says they are important books. They're very important books. And to say that they provide no historical evidence is just being conspiratorial. It's not scholarship, he says. He then goes on to say that no bona fide scholar would say the Gospels just don't have any historical information. That's just wrong, end quote. As I was preparing for tonight, I could run across this prime example here from a Muslim Facebook post. I blotted out his name there, but he's quoting Bart Ehrman. He's doing exactly what we know that Muslims love to do. And here, Bart Ehrman says that ancient Christians knew of far more gospels than the four that eventually came to be included in the New Testament. And what he doesn't tell you is that they also recognize these gospels for what they are, forgeries. Historically, they don't measure up to the criteria by which the authentic gospels were evaluated and recognized. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the titles such as these, the gospel according to Mark, for example, was added sometime before the end of the first century, according to Martin Hengel. So as these gospels spread and were distributed across a wide geographical region, it was unanimously agreed upon that the authors were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John by the middle of the second century. Craig Evans says that in every single stage that we have where the beginning or the ending of the work survives, we have the traditional authorship. There were no anonymous gospels, nor do we have copies of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John with any other name on them. So posts like this one hold little, if any, historical weight at all. This is just typical Muslim response, typical arguments from our Muslim friends where they use Bart Ehrman's words selectively. Bart also says, and this is what they love to ignore, he says Muslims have no access to the historical Jesus. You never hear a Muslim quote this. You never hear him talking about this. He goes on to say that basically that this is true of the gospels, the later gospels of Christianity as well. In other words, the apocryphal gospels. So how does he know this? What is the evidence? That's what I want to look at tonight, and that's what I want to try to present to you. What exactly do historians look for? There's a lot that could be said, I think, in answer to this question, but tonight I want to focus on answering the questions that have to do with the names associated with the places described in the Bible or the Qur'an, the places described therein, and do we have an accurate description of the geography in the Bible and the Qur'an? And again, the same thing with botany. And we'll begin by looking at the most popular names among first century Jews in Israel. I absolutely love this argument. Dr. Peter Williams, I ran across his book. I hadn't read it in a while, but there's also the book by Richard Balcom that has this study in it as well. But here on the slide, I have listed the top 9 names that were part of this study of 3,000 names. And I just found it really interesting. Even though the Gospels and Acts were most likely written outside of Israel, they reflect the naming patterns associated with this place and with this time. So these names that you see here, and obviously they're very familiar names to you, but these are the most popular Jewish, first century Jewish names in Israel. And if you get outside of Israel, say into Egypt, you find an entirely different set of names. And of course, we see much of the same thing today. You know, in different places, it's very popular to name your child, you know, Mike or Adam or whatever. And if you go somewhere else, you find a different set of names. And so we can go back in history and look at, you know, this is what the historians have done here. They've went back and collectively, you know, looked at all of these names. And again, what I have right here in front of you is the top 9 names, the most popular biblical names from first century Israel. And they are exactly what we would expect to find in the writings of Josephus. Uh, these names also come from the ossuaries, or the Jewish bone boxes, the Judean desert text, and of course the New Testament. Um, the number one name was Simon. It could, it could have taken a different form, like Simeon or something like that, and that could be said of the other names as well. But you have Simon, you have Joseph, Lazarus, Judas, of course Jesus, Ananias, Matthew. Again, exactly what we would expect to find if the Bible gives us accurate historical information, if it gives us eyewitness testimony. And I don't have them listed on here, but the top 2 names for women are Mary, no surprise there either, right? And Salome. So the Bible gets it right. But again, if we go into Egypt, just a short distance away, there's an entirely different set of names. Just to give you a little bit of an example, have you ever heard of Sabaetus, Dositheus? How about Pappus or Ptolemy? We don't find any of these names in the New Testament because these are the names of Jewish men in Egypt, in first century Egypt, not Israel. But if you have multiple people named Simon, John, Jesus, etc., it creates this need to disambiguate. We know that two of the disciples of Jesus were called Simon. So you couldn't just say, "Hey Simon, come here." And we see this reflected in the text. Matthew 10:2 speaks of Simon Peter. Matthew 10:4, Simon the zealot. But we also have Simon the leper, Simon of Cyrene, Simon the tanner. Just to give you a few more examples, we also see the need to disambiguate with Jesus and with Mary. In Matthew 21:11, the crowd refers to Jesus as the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee. Matthew 26:69, Jesus the Galilean. Matthew 26:71, Jesus of Nazareth. We find this type of clarification when the text is quoting someone, and then it goes on. Once this disambiguation has been established, it goes on to use the name Jesus, and we see this in Matthew 26:75. Again, the same with Mary. Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the sister of Martha. So the Bible doesn't just give you Mary, but it clarifies which Mary it's talking about. The Bible uses these popular names, and it reflects this need for clarification, just as we would expect from eyewitness testimony. But if we go into the later apocryphal gospels, and then we'll look at the Qur'an as well, we see that these move away from the name Jesus. The Gospel of Philip refers to him as Christ. The Gospel of Peter refers to him as Lord. The Gospel of Mary, Savior. And these last two, the Gospels of Peter and Mary, they never use the name Jesus, much less set him apart from all the other people named Jesus. The Quran does pretty much the same thing. It doesn't come out any better. Now, just for clarity's sake, I'm fully aware that the English translations of the Quran refer to him as Jesus, but the Arabic is Isa. This is not the Arabic equivalent of Yeshua. It's just not. Isa. This is not the Arabic equivalent of Yeshua. In fact, the oldest known Arabic translation of the Bible, Codex 151, is dated to around 867 AD, and it uses Yeshua instead of Isa. And this tells us that the 9th century Christians were still calling him Jesus, not Isa. So we might rightly ask, who is Isa? Now, again, I want to be fair here. I don't want to, you know, focus too much on the, elevating one text while ignoring, much of what the Quran says elsewhere. The Quran does refer to him as Isa, son of Mary. So it does clarify there. But why not Jesus, son of Mary? And secondly, which Jesus? Which Mary? I personally think it's because the authors of the Quran, I think the authors of the Quran wanted to totally avoid any kind of reference to Yahweh. This is the personal name of God in the Bible. And I'll bring this back around to Jesus here in a moment, but I couldn't help but think of the word hallelujah. This is a universal term meaning praise to Yahweh. Yah is a contraction of the name Jesus. Jesus, his name is Yahshua. Yahweh saves. So the Quran doesn't mention this name. It doesn't mention the name above all names. That is Yahweh. What about Muhammad? He doesn't fare any better. And I want us to think about what do the as we turn our attention to Muhammad and the Quran and the historical evidence for what the Quran says. I want you to think about what do the 7th century coins tell us about this title or name Muhammad. We know that it was a title very early on. It wasn't a name. As you probably know, Dr. J. Smith and his team have done extensive research in this area, and what they have uncovered is just a tremendous problem for Islam. All the 7th century coins are from the north, and they are not very favorable to Islam. First of all, there are no coins in the Hijaz area. Why not? According to the standard Islamic narrative, this is, everything takes place within Mecca and Medina. It takes place in this area. Muhammad dies in 632, but from 664 to 660, from 661 to 664, all the coins are Christian, and there's no mention of Umar or Uthman, these early caliphs. Muhammad again is just used as a title, and the name means the praised one, or the title means the praised one. It's not a name. Moreover, Uthman was supposedly the caliph from 644 to 656, and the one who compiled the Quran in 652, but we don't find his name on any of these coins. I would really, I plan to do more research in this area. I love this argument, and I love looking at history. And I think, again, this is, what Dr. J. Smith and his team have uncovered here in these coins is just devastating for Islam. In 661, there are coins from Muawiyah. Now, you can go to sunnah.com right now, and you will find that there are hadiths that talk about Muawiyah. But according to archaeology, he's from Damascus. Again, way too far north. Even more of a problem for Muslim, his coins have crosses on them. He does introduce the Bismillah, but everyone who spoke Arabic during this time referred to God in this way. And best I remember, the Codex 151, the manuscript that I just mentioned, which is the oldest Arabic translation of the Bible, it uses the Bismillah in this text, even though it's even though it goes on to have, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. A lot of these, again, best that I remember, a lot of these Gospels begin with the Bismillah, or at least part of it. So I found that very interesting. So it's not, surprising that we would, find the Shahada attached to Christianity. Dr. J. Smith says that it's only in the 730s onward that there is evidence of popular devotion to Muhammad as a prophet and a messenger, which makes the Islamic traditions incredibly awkward. What about the 7th century rock inscriptions? There's this gentleman named Ilka Lindstedt researched 100 different rock inscriptions from this area, dated from 640 to 740 AD, from the area of the Arabian Peninsula, and the Arabic inscriptions prior to 690 AD offered no evidence for the standard Islamic narrative. But again, just like the coins in 691, he does find the title Muhammad appears on these rock inscriptions, and of course the Dome of the Rock. From 720 to 730, the terms Muslim begin to be used in reference to a person, and of course Islam is used also as a reference to a religion. And what you see on the slide here is a Greek inscription from Muawiyah, dating from 663 AD. Again, he was supposedly the first caliph of the Umayyad dynasty after the golden age of Islam. He refers to himself here as the servant of Allah. But again, this doesn't suggest that he was a Muslim. This doesn't prove that he was a Muslim. We know that this is the way Muhammad's dad, this is his name, Abdullah. He was a servant of Allah. This was, the way that even Christians referred to God, Arabic-speaking Christians referred to God during this time. So if you look at the top left of this inscription, what do you see? You see a cross. In the very top left there, you have this rock inscription. It's in Greek. It's supposedly from Muawiyah, who was supposed to be an Islamic caliph, but he has a cross in the top left. There's nothing Islamic here. So as you can see, this evidence is just devastating, I think, for Islam. And the names in the Bible are exactly what we would expect to find from eyewitnesses. The names correspond with other first century names from Israel. They date early, and they correspond nicely with the historical narrative of the Bible. But Islam and the Quran fall short when it comes to the names Muhammad, Muslim, Mecca, Islam. They only come much later. And think about this. I mean, you got to remember, according to Islam, Mecca goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. This is supposed to be the oldest historical place in the world, according to Islam. But there's no reference to Muhammad earlier than the 7th century, or the 8th century, really. And of course, with all the construction going on around Mecca and around the Kaaba, there's just absolutely nothing significant been discovered there. But let's look now at how these two religious texts describe geography. I'm going to try to run through this a little quicker, and we'll start with the Bible once again. I actually forgot a slide, didn't I? All right, so what about the geography of the Bible? Do the authors accurately describe the land? That's the question I want to try to answer here. I was a student of Dr. Norman Geisler, and I did remember this quote, but pulled it back up out of his book, 12 Points That Show Christianity is True. He says that Luke named 32 countries, 54 cities, 9 islands, and hundreds of details without making a single error. He even gets the depth of the water right off the coast of Malta in Acts 27:28. Evidently, somebody went out and checked that. But the gospel authors also know that Capernaum is next to the sea. John 2:12 describes the trip from Cana of Galilee to Capernaum as going down. Galilee is 750 feet above sea level, and Capernaum is 750 feet below sea level. So again, the Bible gets it right. In John 5:1, Jesus goes up to Jerusalem, which is 2,575 feet above sea level. The authors of the Bible knew the geographical landscape, and if we turn our attention now back to the Quran, we're going to ask the same question. What about the geography of the Quran? The Islamic sources describe Mecca as being in a valley, in a parallel valley, with a stream. Outside are the ruins and a pillar of salt, with mountains overlooking the Kaaba. Yet Mecca is not in a valley, and the other details do not fit with Mecca either. There was no water in Mecca. This is why the place doesn't appear on a map, on the early maps. If there's no water, you really can't support life of any kind. So once more, the Bible proves to be, I would say, very much historically superior to the Quran. We're going to see this again with botany. If we look at the botanical landscape as described in Luke 1904, here it tells us that Zacchaeus climbed a sycamore tree. And the Bible actually describes a very specific kind of tree here, or sycamore tree here in Jericho. How did Luke know about this tree? He was either an eyewitness or he had access to eyewitness testimony. Because there are no sycamore trees in Turkey, Italy, or Greece. This tree is specific to parts of Africa and Arabia, as well as Jericho. There's much more that could be said about this topic. I was reading Tacitus the other day, and Tacitus, I believe it was his father-in-law, was in the UK, and so Tacitus supposedly had access to eyewitness testimony through his father-in-law, and his father-in-law described the UK as constantly foggy or constantly cloudy. And I thought, that's very interesting. I had just had a friend who had returned from there, a young friend, and I didn't tell him anything about what I was doing. I just said, I want to ask you an odd question. How would you describe the weather in the UK? And with just a few seconds, he immediately typed back and said it was cloudy the entire time I was there. I just found that very interesting. But that's what we're doing here. We're looking at eyewitness testimony. He was there. I never would have known that. I mean, even from watching videos on YouTube and whatnot, I never would have. I'm just not that observant. I wouldn't have thought that it was constantly cloudy like that, or that was a characteristic of UK. I just never noticed it. But he noticed it because he had been there and he had experienced it. Very, very neat argument, I think. But we'll turn our attention now back to Islam. What about what do the Islamic sources tell us about botany? They tell us that Mecca has trees, even olive trees. I mean, this is just, I'm sorry, I don't mean no disrespect, but this is laughable. Grass, fruit. Again, Mecca has none of these because it's in a desert. It's just too arid and dry to support any of these. Again, why? Because there's no water. Interestingly, Bukhari 2:285 describes Mecca as a place with a stream. So it just doesn't seem, it seems to be describing an entirely different place. It doesn't get it right. It doesn't seem to be giving us eyewitness testimony like we would expect. Very, very neat argument, I think. So let's bring all of this evidence together. I want to give you what is called undesigned coincidences. I don't know if some of you may have heard about this before, but this is also a very interesting way of bringing the different gospels together and demonstrating that these authors did not have a bias. You have random authors saying different things, and when you put them all together, they fit like a puzzle. They make sense. There's many that we could look at. You could get on YouTube and just Google undesigned coincidences and find people like Jonathan McLatchie um, and different people talking about these. But let's look at the miraculous feeding of the 5,000. So, just to be clear here, I'm not trying to prove the miracle. This is not. I'm not in any way saying that this proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that a miracle took place. The question that I'm trying to answer is, do we have eyewitness testimony? Do we have credible historical evidence from these gospels? So we're not trying to prove the miracle here. This account of the miracle feeding can be found in all four gospels, but again, the authors give us different information, and it's just amazing, I think, how it all fits together. Mark 6:39 tells us that the grass was green. During, when Jesus fed the 5,000 men, what Mark noticed was the grass was green. Mark 6:31 tells us many people were coming and going. John 6:4 tells us it was the Passover. In John 6:5, Jesus asks, where can they buy bread? In John 6:7 through 8, we find that Philip and Andrew reply. Luke 9:10, the feeding took place near Bethsaida. John 1:44 tells us Philip and Andrew were from Bethsaida. And then finally, John 6:9 mentions barley loaves. And if we bring put all this together, the 5 barley loaves are an indication that it was right after the barley harvest, which is also the rainy season when the grass would have been green. John 6:9 and Mark 6:39 go together like hand in a glove. John 6:4 tells us it was the Passover, which helps us also make sense of Mark 6:31, many people coming and going. And it's also, I think, further confirmation of the rainy season when the grass would have been green. Luke 9:10 tells us that the feeding took place near Bethsaida, which also explains why Jesus turns to Philip and Andrew and asks them, where should we buy bread? These were local people. In John 1:44, we read that Philip was from Bethsaida, of the city of Andrew and Peter. So again, I'm going to close with this. I'm still amazed. I thought I had hours of material here, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to get through this or not in an hour. But it looks like 30 minutes once again. I just can't seem to get past that 30-minute mark. But the Bible proves itself historically superior to the Qur'an because the Bible was written by men moved along by the Holy Spirit who were eyewitnesses. They were there. They had, these undesigned coincidences tell us that they were, recording different things. They didn't get together and come up with one story. There's 4 gospels, and they said different things, but it all fits together. It all makes sense. It all accurately describes first century Israel, and it demonstrates from a historical perspective that they were either eyewitnesses or they had access to eyewitness testimony. Absolutely love these ideas. I hope you have found them helpful, and I'll conclude with that and see if we have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Olin. I want to say hello to everyone in the chat. We have Nate. We have Slam, Taryn. I have never seen Mojo Dude, but hello and welcome.
Yes.
And we have D New and Trinity Matrix. Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for always stopping by and saying hello. And it doesn't look like we have any questions, but Slam did talk about Lydia McGrew.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't think of her name.
Yeah,
I remember Jonathan McGlatchy, and I was trying to pull it up, but yeah, Lydia McGrew, Tim McGrew. I think they're pretty well known for this. One of them has a book on this on the topic of undesigned coincidences.
that's Lydia. Or right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she's saying in the chat.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Thank you, Slam, for
Yes.
staying on topic and paying attention. Okay. So we don't have any questions, but I do. I have a
Okay.
few. So when you were talking about like the sycamore tree and things that like that just don't make sense. When you have you ever presented this to a Muslim, and if so, what do they say? Like how do they refute that?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I do have, you know this, Carm. I don't have to tell you this, but I want to make sure everybody else knows. I have conversations with Muslims on a daily basis, but this is very much new information for me. This is the first time I've actually presented on this, and I haven't used it in my evangelism and conversations with Muslims. I want to do that, and I
Yeah.
plan to do that, especially with Ramadan coming up. I'm gonna
Yeah.
try to go to the mosque this Friday, and but um, I just it's just such a powerful argument, and I think it's Jay Smith makes this point too. This historical argument, if it's presented in the right way, I think it's not very offensive to them.
Yeah.
But I have found that Muslims don't like to talk about history. They begin with the Quran.
Yeah.
They just don't like to talk about the historical evidence, or they don't begin there. I don't know if, a lot of them even think about it.
I
It-
don't think they do.
yeah,
I don't I think they're so well studied or versed in just the Quran and knowing the things that they feel like they should know, that when something like this is presented to them, it's probably just sounds like, I mean, initially it probably sounds like we're making it up, or, it just doesn't make sense to them.
yeah,
But I mean, what are they left to do after they hear something like that? And then I wonder, like, how like, we only get so much time when we're evangelizing, especially if we're standing outside of a mosque, or, we only have so much time. And I'm sure this isn't nothing that we would directly begin with. I
yeah,
mean, maybe I'm curious to know how Jay would say that it's how we present it. Like what is the best way to present that, something like that?
right. Well, I would add that we know Jay Smith and Hatun herself have had a lot of success with these historical arguments like this. Hatun, I think especially, she has led a number of Muslims to Christ. Now, I don't know. I know this is her usually her focus. This kind of thing, she
Yeah.
focuses on the different Qurans, but her and Jay both love these historical arguments, and they're both enjoying great success, I think, in reaching some of these Muslims.
Yeah.
So we know it works, and it works because God uses it. I mean, um, I don't want to make it sound like that we're trying to argue somebody into the kingdom,
Right.
but this is what God has called us to do. I think Paul reasoned with the Jews and the Greeks in the synagogue and the marketplace, and he basically went back to the Old Testament text that they held authoritative, and he argued historically from those texts that Jesus was the Messiah. And I think we can do the same thing with this kind of material.
For sure. It's good stuff. It really
Yeah,
is. I mean, because if you can't make sense of it, you can't ignore it and
yeah,
just pretend that you didn't, especially once you're presented with it, you can't act like you never heard it. I mean, and the Lord does use different information for different types of people. Some
yeah,
people, they may brush it off, but some people, we never know that they may be doubting things already. And this just might be something that they're, going to look into.
Yeah, I think a lot of Muslims, they try to brush it off, and they try to make it, you know, like it doesn't affect them in any kind of way. But again, like you just said, the Holy Spirit can use this long after we're gone, and it's truth. Uh, I don't think historical truth can't be known like mathematical truth, but I think we can know history, and I think we can examine it, critically. And this is what we're doing, and I think that this kind of thing has to stick with the Muslim long after you're gone. And again, it just gives the Holy Spirit an opportunity to convict them and remind them of this material, speak to them, remind them of Bible verses that we may have used in conversations. But I it's interesting that I didn't care anything about history in high school, but all of a sudden I love history when it comes to the
Yeah.
Bible
I'm the
and
same way. It's crazy.
yeah.
My daughter is a history major,
Oh
and
wow.
years ago when she went into that, I mean, still before I was learning so much about the history of Islam, Christianity, all of that,
Yeah.
I was like, history? But now all the classes that she's taken, and it's so crazy how things like the stuff that I'm learning over here throughout the years, the stuff she was learning in Middle Eastern studies and
Yeah.
historical evidence and things like that, like how it just crossed paths, and it's just amazing. And now we just got to be grateful for the ones that have paved the way and did the work. I mean, we continue to add to all of the work that everybody's been doing, but
Yeah.
I'm grateful for all the information and the internet, that the things that we've learned that we're able to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bible emphasizes history too. I mean, I gave you a few verses
Yeah.
from, the one from 1 Corinthians 15. I think is probably the most popular. I mean, Paul basically says, I'm paraphrasing him. He basically says, if the resurrection is not a real historical event, then your faith is vain.
Yep.
Your preaching is vain. It's worthless.
Yep.
We also know in Galatians 1 and 2 that he uses the Greek word from which we get our English word history from. He goes to, Paul goes to Peter, and he goes there to check out to make sure he's preaching the same gospel that Peter, James, and John, the what he calls the pillars of the faith. He wants to make sure that he's preaching the same gospel that they were preaching. So he goes to confirm the gospel that he's been preaching and make sure it's the same gospel historically that they have been preaching. So um, the Bible emphasizes history, and
Yeah.
I just think it should be important to us as well. We have a historical faith, and again, the Quran is the one that comes along, much later, totally disconnected from first century um, Israel and Jesus, and changes the story. And not only does it change the story, as I hope that I've demonstrated here tonight, that it just doesn't seem to be giving any kind of even eyewitness testimony concerning Mecca and Medina and
Yeah.
Muhammad.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see. All right. So, you guys have any questions? You want to post them in the chat before we wrap up? Hello, Brandon. Welcome. Hello, Truth Defenders.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Again, I hope you have found it helpful.
Yeah, Brandon says he's going to have to rewatch later. He's always here. Thanks for joining. All right. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Anything upcoming things you got going on, or
Well, we've
anything?
got the Strong Tower East Coast Conference,
Yep, that's coming up in May, the end
May
of May.
31st, June 1st, I think is
Mhm.
the dates. But
I'm gonna try to make it. It's not that far from me.
yeah, awesome, awesome.
Hmm. Here, let
Yeah.
me give some things that are going. We got Detroit coming up in July. Um, we have.
Do you have the dates for that? You said July.
I don't have the dates.
Okay, I was trying to find those the other
Yeah.
day. I'm sorry.
We
Let me.
just know we're going there, but I don't have the dates
Yeah.
exactly. But we also have our West Coast Strong Tower, September 13th through the 15th. And we've got a whole lineup with that. That's going to be great too. I think Yeah, and everybody can always go to ministry2muslims.com to get any more information. All of our stuff is there. Oh, hey, Emmanuel, you're going to be in Michigan in July? I might see you there. That'll be great. We'll put you to work. Just kidding. Oh, okay. We have a question here from Mojo. How are coincidences a proof for anything?
Well, the different gospel authors, again, I'm demonstrating that they recorded what they saw. They didn't make this story up. The grass was green. This coincides with the Passover. It also coincides with the barley harvest, which was, immediately following the barley harvest in first century Israel, was when there were heavy rains, or the most rain in this area, so the grass would have been green. So this, again, this is a proof in the sense that it tells us the authors were there, or they were either recording, eyewitness testimony. So again, if we go to the Quran, we don't find this. If you're going to make up a story, just like my friend in the UK, if I had to, if I was going to make up a story about the UK and I'd never been to the UK, there's no telling what I might say. I never would have thought to say that it was constantly cloudy there. I would have never known that. But that's a characteristic that not only Tacitus writes about, but my friend also confirmed it, that that's what he experienced while he was there. So I think it's proof, again, to answer your question, in the sense that it gives us accurate information about what we would expect from a specific place or a specific time with the names. So in that sense, it's historical proof. Is it like mathematical truth? No. But I do think we can know history, and I do think we should, look at this kind of evidence to determine, what is historically accurate and what is not.
Okay. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Did I miss any more?
Okay.
Truth Defender wants to know what's for dinner.
Tacos.
Yep. That's always what it is. And his menu anyway.
Right.
All right. Okay, yeah. So that looks like we're done with the questions here.
All right.
All right. Well, you're welcome. Thank you for that good presentation. I always appreciate what you bring to the table. And for everyone who missed it, yeah, just go back and watch from the beginning. It's going to be here. And to all of you who joined tonight, thank you so much. And we will see you next Sunday. Have a good night. 1 second. Okay, have a good night.